Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain. Now, welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how we doing?
Exceptionally well, Scott.
Man,
It's just a surprising day. Surprising and I don't know, encouraging. You saw my commentary today. One of my least favorite retailers, I think one that me and some other professionals believe probably shouldn't even be in business today,
right?
is changing supply chain and merchandising together in a way that should have been done decades ago is hyper encouraging and frankly something that every retailer, I mean, they're not just changing their business, they are changing the business, in my opinion, just the way that they're approaching it. So super, super encouraging by our
Out,
friends at Macy's.
outstanding. I tell you, I love it. Love your commentaries Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every morning on LinkedIn. Y'all check that out. It is not to be missed. And today, speaking of things I love, we've got one of our longest running series, most popular series. It's Supply Chain Today and Tomorrow with Mike Griswold with Gartner. Greg, today's going to be a bit of a unique hour with Mike, as we're going to be walking through some of the leading headlines from, of course, inflation to Amazon and employee turnover there, Kroger's and Albertsons, their merger news, and of course, some bold predictions for the holiday shopping season from a supply chain standpoint. And Greg, since we get asked all the time about how to get ahead in your career, we're going to go ahead and pose that to both of y'all in today's show. So it is a jam-packed episode.
Oh boy. Yeah, it is.
Now,
I mean, it is. And always great when Mike stops through. He's the consummate professional. I think the last show, the one I missed, where you guys actually got to talk, uh, he talked about what his role is
right.
and how people interact with him, which I think is incredibly valuable. A long time coming, right? Probably should have shared that a little earlier, but I'm glad he got the chance to do it anyway.
Completely agree. I think a lot of folks are mystified with what industry analysts do, especially Hall of Fame analysts like Mike, who's also been a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner, which is important. So y'all check that out. That was the last month's episode, and the replay is always available. Now, we're going to share a couple of quick events, say hello to a few folks, and then we'll be swooshing in Mike Griswold. But I got a quick trivia question for you. Do you know, Greg, what took place 1 year ago? Let's see here. 1 year ago today, and this might be a clue.
Wait, what?
This might,
Let me guess. Let me think about that. The Braves won the World Series.
yes. And despite their collapse this year against the Phillies, which are giving the Astros all they want, then some.
Right. I
Um,
mean, the Astros can't even cheat their way to the World Series
oh
victory this
gosh,
year.
we're gonna get some hate mail today
Did they give up
from
4 dingers yesterday? Not that
something
I
like
want to
that.
rub it in, but I think it was like 3 dingers in one inning. Is that right? Something like
Yeah, I
that.
think you're right. So
That's a
we're gonna
shame.
hear we're gonna hear a lot from Macy's folks and from the Houston Astros folks, but that's okay. All in good fun. Okay, so yeah, we celebrate 1 year ago today. The World Series was won by the
Yeah.
Atlanta Braves. It's still the only team to win a World Series championship in 3 cities: Atlanta, Milwaukee,
Also,
and Boston.
still World Series champion
That is right.
for a
Thank you.
few more
You're
days.
making my day. Now I'm on Greg's level.
Right.
All right. So kidding aside, I want to share a couple of quick learning opportunities and really volunteer service opportunities. And I want to start with our ongoing leveraging logistics for Ukraine initiative, right? Led by our friends over at Vector Global Logistics. I tell you what, they give so much for the good things and do good initiatives out across the world. Lately, though, the recent wrinkle or twist in this initiative is they're soliciting letters written by kids, letters of support, like the ones pictured here, that they want to bundle and send over to school kids in Ukraine. Now, Greg, folks may like roll their eyes at that, but Greg, back in the day when you get something in the mail, I mean, that made your day. It maybe made your week, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here, right? Show
Mhm.
some meaningful support. Your quick thoughts here, Greg.
Well, it did. It made you feel significant, right? That somebody would actually address something to you. Now, everything is addressed to you all the time, but rarely in actual physical form. And I think that's really, really powerful. It is probably, Scott, more powerful than it even was when we were kids, right?
Yes, that's a great
So,
point.
I mean, there's so many other ways to communicate these days.
Yep, great point. So it's all about, you may hear Mike and the Gartner team talk about business outcomes. A little twist on that. This is focused on humanitarian outcomes. And so far, over 500,000 pounds of relief supplies have made it across the pond to Ukraine and Poland and folks in need. Now, all of that is governed and driven by our planning sessions. And the next one is November 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. There's no obligation. You can come, put your mic on mute, and just listen and learn kind of what's going on, especially from a practitioner standpoint, what the need is, what's being done. There's no obligation. Of course, if you can give, like Greg says, give big, give small, but just give. It'd be great if you can support our efforts. But check out the link they dropped in the comments, and we'd love to have you be a part of our efforts. Okay. And then really quick, our next webinar, Greg, November 9th, we're going to be talking with our friends at Omnia Partners about how GPOs, not GTOs, I bet Carls can help us maybe not mitigate.
A GTO is not going to help you mitigate risk.
That's right.
GPO is.
You beat me to it as always. Yes, but check out this November 9th session at 12 noon with our dear friends at Omnia Partners, how GPOs can help mitigate your risks. Okay, and that link is in the comments as well. Before we bring on Mike, Greg, let's say hello to a few folks. We've got a good friend back with us, old PB, Peter Boley all night and all day. He says, sweet, finally catching a chat with Mike again. Hope you had a great golf season, Mike. We'll find out. Get Mike's update on golf, huh?
Yeah, let's check out his handicap. I'd like to see some actual verification of that as well, Peter.
That's right. Mario is with us. Great to see you guys. I like the positive vibes here. Greetings from Dallas. Did I say Mike? I meant Mario. I'm probably thinking Mike.
We said Mario.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mario, great to have you here. We lean into positive vibes and positive thinking. And hey, how about them Cowboys? Greg, how are the Cowboys doing?
I don't know. That's I mean, they had the potential for a real quarterback
right
controversy with Cooper Kupp.
I'll go with that.
Yeah. Although
Mario,
I'm a huge Dak Prescott fan. I loved watching him play in college. I think if they can get an offensive line in front of him, right?
I think he's going to be back. I think he's getting healthy maybe this week or next week.
He was available last week. I think they played a Sunday night or a Monday night game. That's embarrassing. I'm sorry.
Well,
I've been woefully deficient in watching football this season. So.
Mario, let us know. And great to have you here. Appreciate the great feedback there. Of course, Catherine and Amanda behind the scenes helping to make production happen today. Big thanks to all that y'all do there. Reggie, you're welcome for the invite. We try to have the movers and shakers with us on all of these live streams, and glad that you're here. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Helmet, great to see you. Scott and Greg, you're our supply chain champions. A little sports analogy like that, Helmet.
Yeah.
Greg, any thoughts? How would you respond?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, I think we're maybe coaches, right, of hopefully champions and future champions.
There we go. I like that. And always great to have you with us, Helmet. Appreciate what you do. I think especially in the procurement space, your procurement thought leadership. Okay. So with no further ado, Greg White, we've got one of our favorite guests who's been with us probably, I think we're going on year 3 of this series, if I'm not mistaken. It's evolved a bit.
Nobody's put up with us for so long.
Me neither. But I'll tell you, what has not changed is the feedback we get when Mike joins us and what he shares here. So y'all are in for a treat. So with that said, I want to welcome in the one and only Mike Griswold, Vice President Analyst with Gartner. Mike, how are you doing?
Hey, great. I'll give you a real quick Dallas Cowboys update. Cooper Rush was the quarterback.
Cooper Kupp's the wide receiver. Sorry.
Cooper Kupp is the guy from the Rams. Right. Dak has been back for 2 weeks. They beat the Lions and they beat the Bears. Now they're on a bye week. So they're doing all right. I mean, we had myself included when Dak got hurt against Tampa Bay, the season looked like it was over.
Yeah.
Cooper Rush came in, played really well. There was never going to be a quarterback controversy, despite what people like to stir up. And the bye comes at a good time, but they still need to beat some good teams, and they haven't done that yet. They lost to the Eagles, and now the opening season loss to Tampa Bay. If I put my college basketball hat on, that's a bad loss.
It's not a
Right?
quality loss. You're right.
No, it is not a quality loss the way Tampa Bay is playing. So we'll see. The defense is playing well. I think the offense is
You're a
starting to play.
Cowboys fan.
Oh yeah. Longtime fan. I mean,
don't
like
think I
I
knew
did
that.
not
long-time
know that.
fan. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
I didn't
So
know
anyway,
that.
it's great to see everyone. Great to be here. This is one of the highlights of my month for sure. Is spending time with all of you and the people that are kind enough to carve an hour out of what I'm sure is a very busy day to spend an hour with us. So I really appreciate all that.
Man, learn something new every day. We're going to have you on our Supply Chain Nerds Talk Sports show
Well,
soon, Mike.
I mean,
that would
first
be
of all,
great.
about basketball, of course, but now, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
yes.
Coming up soon. We're overdue. We're going to have our friend Albert from the Atlanta Gladiators in a hockey franchise. And
Oh,
we're
okay.
overdue for that. They just kicked off their new season and they put on a quality show. So we'll have that. Get ready for that coming up soon. Okay. So Greg and Mike, as we get down to business, we've got some great news headlines to walk through. I can't wait to get y'all's take on some of those things, as well as some advice for folks fighting to climb up that career ladder. But I want to start with kind of a fun warm-up question, kind of fun and kind of serious at the same time. You know, between all the pressures of the post-pandemic world, inflation, supply chain pressures, you name it. It's all about stress all too often. Then the holidays on top of it. But today is National Stress Awareness Day, right? So Mike and Greg, Mike, I'm going to start with you. What is one thing that you do to de-stress and kind of recharge the batteries a bit?
It's usually something around exercise, whether it's running, whether it's using the tonal gym we have in the house. I find exercise for me, running in particular, is a great way to just kind of not think about stuff. I find when I run, I think about, okay, what are some things we want to do in practice today for basketball? Or if I've got, a research project I'm working on, what might I want to think about that? So for me, it's usually something exercise related, and as much as I have this huge disdain for running, it tends to be my go-to thing though when I want to get some exercise and I want to just kind of forget about stuff.
Sounds good to me, Greg.
I just internalize it and bottle it up. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I really, it depends on the day, honestly. Yesterday I went to get fish and chips and sat down next to a couple who had their own stress problems. So after they left, I might have had a cold beverage because they actually did not help me de-stress. Sometimes just get a bite, do a lot of nothing, watch the sunrise. I, like Mike, despise running, absolutely despise it. Still manage to do a walk or run walk, almost every day. And then I'll quit for a while because, did I mention I despise it? But it just depends on the day. I mean, honestly, I kind of am really good at just shrugging stress off. I usually try to resolve whatever is causing me stress in some way.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I liked your first
terrible
answer
at
about
it, just to be clear, in case anyone was left.
I liked your first answer, balling it up. It reminds me of that movie from
just way down deep inside there, and
yes.
we just don't talk about it ever again.
There's that Michael Douglas movie back from the late
Yes.
80s. What was the name of that?
Falling
Falling down. Yes.
Actually, that was from Ricky Bobby from
what's
Talladega Nights.
Well, hey, y'all let us know. So Catherine's talking about running is her go-to for de-stressing. Beautiful views on the trails up there in North Georgia where she lives. That's a great, pretty picture. T-Squared's talking about how price gouging is also adding to the stress. That's a great point there. He was talking about, I think, Little Debbie's or Honey Buns yesterday, but great to have you with us. T-Squared holding down the Fort Force on YouTube. I think spending time with the kids. Some folks that might be that might add stress in some days, but I like one of my favorite things to do when I have time is picking up the kids from school and being the first people they talk to as they get in the car, and and sometimes hearing their daily challenges makes mine, just kind of melt away. All right, so Reggie, you're tuned in looking for some information on locking in freight contracts. We may be able to touch on that today, but we'll definitely be touching on it on future episodes. And yes, we're all growing some gray hair based on some of the things we're seeing out there in the freight and supply chain space. So we'll try to get to that. Great to have you here today. All
I
right.
just got some news that should reduce stress for anyone who is an NFL fan.
Okay.
The Snyder family has just hired a Bank of America securities team to explore selling the Commanders.
Wow. Okay.
Getting the Snyders out of NFL football is a boon to every single football fan
All
around
right.
the world.
Man,
Now, if we could just get rid of the Dolphins owner also.
So come here for your sports
There you
updates,
go.
your Cowboys updates, and your football business news updates as well. Thanks to Mike and to Greg. So we'll see how quickly that happens. So I want to switch over to something, of course, that everyone's talking about. Everyone's feeling. We just rolled off probably one of the most expensive Halloweens of the year. I'm scared to even look at the estimates of what your average Thanksgiving meal is going to cost this year. Inflationary environment. So a quick data point that most folks should already be familiar with, as reported by our friends at NBC News through last September. So September 2022, the 12-month inflation rate hit 8.2%. Right. So I want to start with Mike. What are some of the things that you're seeing companies do to navigate this inflationary environment?
Yeah, if I can figure out how to post one of our articles on LinkedIn, I will do that. We've written a lot on supply chain and inflation and the R word, right, with the recession word. Two things as I was looking at my notes from one of the short notes we wrote around this that really resonated with me. The first is around the S&OP process and how can companies bring the cost element into your S&OP discussions so that as you're thinking about medium to long term planning, that process now has cost considerations into it and the potential of changing costs, and how might that change how you think about matching demand and supply. The second one is a little bit probably a little bit more tactical, which is get rid of discretionary inventory. Now, that presupposes that companies have gone through the exercise that says this is the classification of inventory that I have. Here's some healthy inventory, here's some unhealthy inventory, right? Companies need to get rid of that discretionary unhealthy inventory as quickly as they can. And then they need to be smarter around where are we going to invest in upcoming inventory. And I'm sure this will be obvious to everyone, but try to avoid investing in inventory that has some link to market volatility, right? Try to invest in inventory that's going to be relatively stable, even if we go through an increased, pricing environment that we're in today. So the one that I thought was the most interesting was the S&OP one, especially, and Greg will appreciate this. If we think about retail, right now we're just kind of sorting out the S&OP process, and for us it's primarily around quantities. How much do I need? Where do I have it? When do I need it? We haven't really matured into that financial element of S&OP. All the other industries that are a lot more mature than in S&OP should really be thinking about that costing component. Is it baked into your S&OP process, and how is it forming decisions in the medium to long term?
Greg, what would you add to that?
Well, I like Reggie's kind of off the cuff comment on that topic there. Some of them are going out of business.
Reggie tells it like it is, huh?
Yeah, right. I mean, more will. You know what I think? What I haven't seen that I think a lot of consumers are starting to get frustrated with, which will shift demand, is they've continued to see inflation and corporate profits rise, which means the retailers, the manufacturers, the brands, they are not sharing in the pain that the consumer is seeing. I don't know that I would expect them to, but margin. I want to be clear for those who are angry about this out there. Margin dollars are increasing for retailers because we keep paying the price, by the way, but margin percentage is not increasing in a lot of cases. It's just because the volume. They're making the same gross margin. 26%
Right.
on $2 is bigger than 26% on $1. So it in dollars, I should say. So I think that is one thing that I'm seeing is I'm starting to see a little bit of consumer backlash on that, and starting to see some awareness of retailers on that. So I expect us to have, if you're a, oh gosh, what was the movie? Anyway, expect us to start having some Schooner Tuna commercials, the tuna with heart,
Right. Right.
And if anybody doesn't know, you can just Google Schooner Tuna and you'll see the video.
Isn't that Hamburger Helper, I think, is the brand that would put out that those tuna meals. Greg, is that what you're saying? Remember the hand with the heart, and they had a whole line of Hamburger Helper products. Is that who you?
No, this is what is the name of the movie? It had Michael Keaton, I think.
Okay.
And
you're thinking Night Shift.
We're
gonna feed the tuna fish mayonnaise.
You can't feed chili to a baby is the other famous line.
Okay.
It was Terry Garr and either Michael Keaton or Tom Hanks. I cannot believe I still get those two guys confused. But anyway, she goes to work because he gets laid off from his high-paying job, and she just absolutely kills it.
Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom, there it is. Yes, thank you.
That is Michael Keaton.
Mr. Mom, the Schooner Tuna will reduce our prices during these difficult times, but as time, as the economy relaxes, whatever, we'll go back to our regular pricing.
Yep.
Schooner Tuna, the tuna with a heart.
I think the other thing that's happening, I think is people are really having that need versus want discussion, right? The one you always have with your kids, right? Your kids, I need a cell phone. No, you don't. You want a cell phone. So that need versus want is really, I think, climbing up the consumer decision tree. And I think we're finding less energy on the want right now because of prices. And let's not forget that inflation affects everything. So you've got people making trade-off decisions between Schooner Tuna and gas in the car so I can go to work, right? You've got, gas in the car versus do I pay all the electric bill? So this whole need versus want thing, I think, is really ratcheted up and has been ratcheted up over the last probably 12 months.
Yep.
It's a good point because savings are declining, right? People saved a lot of the stimulus check that they got. Savings are declining. Personal credit is increasing. The specter of unemployment is definitely out there. We have high employment largely because we have a bunch of volunteers who are outside the employment market. So we talked about this yesterday. 7 million able-bodied men, and I mean men, just men, who are choosing not to work right now, even though there are ample jobs available for it. I think we all have this sort of question of why are there so many jobs available and yet so little, so many people who aren't working, not out of work, but aren't working. So.
All right. So moving right along, I bring T Squared's comment back in here because it wasn't honey buns he was talking about yesterday and some of that price gouging and inflationary pricing. It was tasty cakes. And I believe it was $3.98 is what the going rate is.
Up from like $1.60 or something. Yeah.
Right. So T Squared, thank you for these pulses in the market on these important products. I'm partial to Little Debbie's, especially fudge rounds, Star Crunches, Cosmic Brownies. Mike and Greg, now we're talking my language and my upbringing. All right, so moving right along. I appreciate y'all's take on how companies and business leaders are navigating some of y'all's initial observations there. I want to move into the story about Amazon because some internal documents came out. This comes from our friends at Popular Science, which, by the way, 150 years they're celebrating. And if you ever got Popular Science, my favorite part as a kid was they would take a look back of the technologies that they forecasted was coming, and they'd look back 100 years, they'd look back 50 years, and look back 20 years. And it was the best part, I think one of the best parts of the magazine. But nevertheless, Amazon's employee retention and their turnover rates in particular may be costing the company some 8 billion, as in Bezos, per year. So, Mike, talk to us about this report here.
So let me preface all this by saying, right, this was not made publicly available by Amazon. It was leaked. So let's, in some ways, let's maybe take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
Having said that, though, and I may need help with the math, right? 8 billion. This as you read it was across multiple tiers of employee level, everything from management to people down in the warehouse. So if you were to say, let's use a round number because I need easy math of $100,000 an associate, that's 80,000 people, I think, right? That Amazon is turning over. And even if we say that's half right, it's 4 billion. That's 40,000 people. So there's an issue there, right? And I think the issue for the broader population is, are we focused enough on attracting, but probably are we overemphasizing the retaining part within our workforce?
Mm.
We've talked a lot on here with some of our Gartner research around moving from location centric work to human centric work, recognizing through the pandemic that not everything has to be done in an office. Even people like Amazon that have warehouse and manufacturing jobs, there's things you can do within that environment to create more human centric work. So to me, this is an indication of a company that is not alone in struggling with retention. And to me, if retention isn't something the C-suite is talking about, then you're going to end up like Amazon. You're not I mean, there's probably only one company on the planet that could afford $8 billion in associate turnover, and that's Amazon. But other organizations will have order of magnitude that is impactful to them if we're not focusing on retention. And to me, that needs to be one of the top of mind things for all organizations, supply chain and the rest of the organization. How are we engaging our associates? What are we doing consciously to drive retention? And are we listening to our associates when they talk to us about the things they want to do, their career aspirations, and what do they want to do about the job environment? To me, this set all kinds of alarm bells off for me. Again, even if we say it's only half true, around major retention issues for people that aren't named Amazon as well.
Right. Greg.
I think one thing you have to remember is this is a company that hires 120,000 people just for peak season.
Yeah.
So, yes, of course, their turnover is going to be enormous, right? And a lot of the jobs that they hire people for are transitory, even. The warehouse workers, we've seen a trend with people staying away in droves, as I like to say, from dark, dirty, dangerous, and dull jobs. And there are plenty of those in an Amazon warehouse. So I think, I don't know if we should be shocked by this number, right? I mean, the company just receded below $1 trillion in valuation just yesterday. So $8 billion is a rounding error for them.
Yeah.
So I do think all of what Mike said, however, is true for Amazon and for everyone else. And it's going to be particularly important considering what we talked about just a few minutes ago with inflation and recession and whatever other economic transition we're going to experience.
Yep.
We've already started to see the trend of baby boomers coming back into the workforce because their stock portfolios got crushed. Therefore, their retirement has been crushed, and now they can now answer the question, "What the am I doing this for anyway?" So, and it is for the money. So, I mean, I think there's a lot in transition here. There's a lot of I don't know what I want to say, activist employees at Amazon. And, I'm not like a huge advocate of Amazon, though I am a
Right.
shareholder, full disclosure. But I think I have 13 shares. Uh,
Watch out
um,
for the hostile takeover from Greg White.
That's right. That's right.
but this is something that we need to be concerned about, because we're also in a transitional employment period where, because people are staying away from certain jobs, or they're transitory in these certain jobs, those jobs are going to go to automation, and they're going to have to integrate with the people who have satisfying jobs and who want to stay in those jobs, and who want to continue to do the kind of work that they're doing, and they're going to be doing it, instead of with human beings, with robots or other automation or autonomous. So you have to be very conscious of what is keeping or driving away people in your enterprise.
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe a couple other thoughts, Scott, 'cause I know you want to move on. I think Amazon's a good example. I think, particularly if you think about the warehouse side of the house, is, you know, what are you measuring? How are you incenting people? And how does that drive the culture around whether people want to stay or go? And I
Hmm.
think that's not, I'm not saying that the way Amazon does it is wrong. All I'm saying is, as in any organization, you need to look at the measures and the metrics that you're signaling are important,
Yeah.
and how does that align with how people see themselves and how they value their job. The second thing is in the in that note, it talks about regretted and unregretted. I think the other takeaway from this is, when you have, unregretted attrition, part of the exercise needs to be why, right? And you have to be willing to hear the feedback around why people are leaving. And you can't just gloss it over around, some transitory type of things, or other kind of surface level reasons people are leaving. You need to dig deeper and really understand, and be very reflective, and be open to that reflectiveness around why people are leaving. I mean, one of the things we talk about at Gartner is, when we think about this topic, and Greg, you hit on it, is why stay? So we spend a lot of time with people at Gartner saying, why are you staying with us?
Mm.
Again, not that we want you to leave, but we want to understand, why do you stay? What are the things you like about the job? What are the things that keep you wanting to stay with us? And I think more organizations, when they look at that regretted versus unregretted, should be thinking about, why are people staying, to your point, Greg, and how do we amplify that?
Hmm.
That to me, that's going to be a huge issue for us over the next 12 to 18 months, is this broader talent discussion.
Yep.
It's too infrequent that companies ask the question, what is going right? They always
Right.
ask the question, what is going wrong, or what's gone
Right.
wrong? But what is going right is critical to reinforcing the behavior, or the operations, or the outcomes that you want to continue in your
Right.
Yep.
organization.
Right. The employee idea bucket isn't good enough. Right. A little tip of the hat
Yeah.
to Michael Scott, The Office. Right. It's not good enough. You got to lean in. You got to be engaged. You got to seek out the information, whether it's easy to hear or not. You got to lean
Right.
in, and then, of course, once you gather it, you got to take action and do something about it to protect the team you have, and to improve your overall talent management approach. So, Mike and Greg, appreciate your perspective here today. I just want to point something out, because it just dawned on me. So I'm going back to this graphic here. Greg, we've done over 1,000 shows on the main channel, hundreds of live streams and webinars, and this is the first time we've ever referenced a story at Popular Science.
Popular Science,
So
right?
kudos to that team for jumping into the Amazon news and sharing these reported findings, and kidding aside, 150 years, that is something certainly to celebrate. Okay, so now we're getting to an interesting story that's not new. It's been around for at least a few weeks here. Many outlets, from the Wall Street Journal to here, in this case, CNN Business, have been reporting on Kroger's plans to purchase Albertsons. Now, here's a little interesting twist. I want to couch the perspective you're going to hear from Mike and Greg and myself, perhaps. We're a big Kroger family. We're in there every day, it seems like. We live nearby one of their experiential big mega stores, where they try all kinds of new things and kind of see how it resonates. So the good old Kroger Smart Card, they've been gathering data for me and Amanda for decades, it feels like. And Mike, interesting little take here. You were, I believe, in supply chain at Albertsons earlier in your career. Is that right, Mike?
Correct. Just before we got bought by SuperValue. And
Okay.
that was kind of the impetus for I'm not leaving Boise, Idaho for Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that kind of
Golfing
again,
season is too short.
I don't want to upset, I don't want to add Houston Astro fans, Macy customers, and people that live in Minneapolis to the list of hate mail we're going to get. But I wasn't making that move. And that was kind of the impetus to the whole analyst journey that we spent some time talking about last month. So yes,
All
have
right.
had some experience with them.
So I'm looking forward to get you and Greg's take on why they would do this. Obviously, a lot of folks are familiar with Walmart getting more and more into the grocery game, and Kroger and Albertsons together. There's a much bigger footprint. Some of the reasons, but Mike, just in general, and then Greg, Mike, talk to us about what you see with this potential merger.
Yeah, it's interesting. My early days at AMR, when I would talk to Kroger and Albertsons and Safeway, who was by themselves at the time, when you would overlay the map of the United States, there was a lot of overlap between any two of them, right? But when you looked at all three of them together, which is now really what we're talking about, they pretty much cover now the United States, which I think this is to your comments, Scott. This is a reaction to where Walmart has gone with grocery, and the strength and the presence, and just the share that Walmart has in grocery. I think this is probably something that was inevitable, and whether it was, although I think back in my AMR days, I would have thought it was more likely that it would have been Safeway who would have bought the other two than where we landed with Kroger. I think, though, fast forwarding today, I think the right company, Kroger, of those three, is the right one to now have kind of the control and influence over the three. Kroger has always struck me, whether it's what you talked about in terms of the customer intelligence. They've always been pretty sophisticated for a food retailer in the technology space. A lot of investment. You talked about the innovation store, a lot of investment in technology. They've got a really good culture around innovation and technology. So I think overall the right company is now kind of shepherding these other two through the journey. There are going to be, for those people that like to watch the FTC, this is going to be a circus. You've already started to read about what's going to have to happen in terms of divestitures. You've already heard Albertsons talk about to maybe get ahead of the divestiture, spinning off, similar to they did when they got bought by SuperValue, spinning off a small 200 store chain that I don't know where or what it's going to do.
Right.
But there's a lot more. I mean, the people that are going to get rich on this are the FTC lawyers for sure, which always happens in a merger and acquisitions, especially of this size. I'm excited for this because I do think if there's someone that can give Walmart a run for their money relative to technology and innovation, it's always been Kroger. I think there's good infrastructure in Albertsons and Safeway. I think culturally, overall, I think it's a pretty good fit in terms of the Albertsons and the Kroger culture in particular. I think are pretty well aligned in terms of, acting locally, but trying to govern, more broadly.
Yep.
So I think this is going to be a good deal once it finally gets sorted out. There'll be a lot of chaos until it gets sorted out. But I think Kroger is the right one to come out. I don't want to say come out on top. It wasn't really a competition, but I do think of those three big ones that you had,
Yep.
Kroger being the one that's driving the bus, I think is a good thing.
All right.
And I think it's a good thing for the market. I think it's a great thing for the supermarket industry, who've always been laggards, with maybe with the exception of Kroger for sure, when it comes to technology and innovation. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Okay. So, really quick, Greg, I'm coming to you next, but Kroger's also been leading the way in terms of rolling out those self-checkout lanes that we've talked about before. I'm a big fan of, because we can purchase as many dog treats and Little Debbie's and not be judged for it, because we're self-checking out. So little another tidbit about how Kroger runs its stores. Greg, what's your take on Kroger Albertsons pending marriage?
Well, yeah, I agree with the core precept that Mike talked about. That Kroger is the right company to lead here. So I'm from Kansas. There was a little tiny chain of grocery stores called Dillon's, and when Kroger bought them, they elevated the CEO of this tiny grocery store chain, David Dillon, to CEO role at Kroger. And to me, not only does that show a certain openness, but a really kind of collaborative spirit that you see as well, because they also allow some of their really premier brands to keep their label. Right here on Hilton Head, we have Harris Teeter, which is a legendary grocery brand in the Southeast, particularly in South Carolina and along the coast anyway, and Kroger stores. And they've allowed them to have their distinct personalities even within like 5 miles of one another, 3 miles. I don't know, small island, whatever. They're very close to one another. And they did the same with Dillon for a good long while. And they did with Fry's and other companies that they have bought over time, and they've integrated them very well, and they have created the efficiencies with some local control that Mike has talked about. I just think they do it right. And look, this was largely a defensive move for the collection of other grocers other than Walmart, right? They have to get bigger to be able to compete with Walmart effectively, because they need the volume discounts and whatever else that they can tackle. Plus, they need to modernize how grocery is done. So much of the store is still done by merchandisers, right? It's manual, it's emotional. Here's how much space I have. I'm going to fill that space with Cheerios or whatever it is, right? They need to think a little bit more scientifically, and they need to automate a lot of what's going on. And this gives them a scale that they can definitely do that, undertake what I'm sure will be multi-million or maybe even billion-dollar implementation of a technology that brings things like complete oversight and understanding of their stock status, of their mixes in the various product mix in the various stores, and what their optimal inventory positions ought to be. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and with the kind of scale that this gives these organizations, it'll give them a huge opportunity to compete with Walmart, but also just be a better enterprise together than they are separately.
Right. Yeah. But not Cheerios. It's got to be Fruit Loops, Fruity Pebbles, anything but Cheerios, and especially not Honey Nut Cheerios. Goodness gracious, those things are horrible.
I would prefer a Frosted Flakes analogy than
oh my
Cheerios,
gosh, yes. Okay,
anyway,
you're right. You're right.
I
Cheerios
think
came to mind, General Mills, right?
Yes.
But yeah, Frosted Flakes is a much better cereal.
The point you made, Greg, I just wanted to amplify because it's spot on, which is the things that Kroger does well were already kind of building blocks that were in place in Albertsons and in Safeway. I'll take the loyalty as an example, right? Safeway already doing mining, pretty much on par with what Kroger was doing. Albertsons was in the early stages of that. So Kroger can elevate that. There's a lot of areas within those two companies that they already had been working on that I think Kroger can take them to the next level. The one challenge I do see with Albertsons in particular is, the big challenge when you compete against Walmart is ultimately it does come down to price and service. Albertsons has tended to skew in their markets on the higher price side. And I think customers would debate whether they were getting the service equivalent for that. So I think one of the challenges Kroger might have is how do we bring kind of that lower price competitive dynamic within the Albertsons footprint. Safeway, I would argue, well, they may have said they wanted to compete at the higher end of price. They were really a price competitor. So I think that DNA that Kroger brings is also going to be good, because at the end of the day, you do have to find a way to competitively compete on price against Walmart. And then where are you going to provide differentiation like that targeted marketing and loyalty that Kroger has an incredible strength is. And I also agree, Greg, Kroger, of all the food retailers, certainly has been doing a lot of really exciting things around automation and innovation, and it was already, I think, doing really, really well in e-commerce, which is going to
Yep.
be that other battleground when it comes to food retailing is, order online, collect in store. Kroger doing that really, really well. And I think has another opportunity to elevate both Albertsons and Safeway in that area as well. So again, agree with Greg. I think the right company is driving the bus in this one.
Yep.
Hey, Scott, before we move off,
Yeah.
I have to, my mom is required that I do this whenever we talk about Dillon's. David Dillon, I just want to apologize again for my dad giving you an F in speech class when you were in high school. My mom literally, that's the story she tells. The next day, David was carrying her groceries out from the store, and she was so embarrassed. And he said, and this is talk about the words of a future leader. It's okay, Mrs. White. I deserve the F.
That's good. So one last comment here. Natalie, who lived in Cincinnati, I think she's in the Charlotte area now, speaking to what Greg was talking about, kind of that local flavor. Natalie says Kroger does that within their own chain. They lived in Cincinnati for years. Each location was geared to the local, 5-mile radius or so. That's a good thing. Okay, so a lot more to come on the Kroger's Albertsons story. I want to on this next. This is going to have to be a quick hitter. There's a great article here from Market Watch about kind of the supply chain outlook for the holiday shopping season that evidently we're already in. It's not even upcoming these days if we're already in it. What's in stock, what's not going to be in stock. So Mike and Greg, just a couple quick observations, because I definitely want to get to that final question about not only what's going on at Gartner, but also any tips for folks moving ahead in their career. So a quick observation around the supply chain outlook for the holiday shopping season, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's going to be another tough one, just because of some of the things you already talked about, inflation, recession. I think we're still dealing with supply constraints in general, all across the supply chain.
Yep.
My advice to those of us that are going to be shoppers is have a solid plan B, right? If you want a widget X, be ready to settle for widget Y, right? And be okay with that. I think as organizations, we also need to have thoughts around, if I can't get enough inventory to supply my customers in X, what can I offer them in Y? So there's going to need to be, I think this holiday season, I would maybe subtitle it the year of contingency planning for both shoppers and for organizations.
Excellent. Greg, your quick thought?
I agree with Mike. It's going to be a very soft holiday season, and not just because of the difficulty of getting things, but it appears that everyone but Macy's is going to have this landscape of leftovers from products they didn't get out on the shelf last Christmas or during the rest of the year because it arrived late. So maybe Macy's is maybe a really big winner this holiday season, but I fear that hardly anyone else will be.
Well, I would just add to all of our listeners out there, this could be a great year to focus in on presence with a PRESCENCE.
No C.
I might fail speech too, like David Dillon. And not presence, the objects, right? I mean, hey, going back to I think what Mike shared, just be grateful for what you get and not overly choosy, because I'll tell you, between the supply chain, supply challenges we've seen on a variety of products to just how much everything costs, goodness gracious, it'd be a good time to celebrate being with your family and loved ones. Okay. So I've got 12:49. We're coming down the home stretch very quickly, Mike and Greg. So we get this question all the time. We happened, as Murphy's Law goes, we did not get it today. But that's okay. We're going to answer it anyway. So Mike and Greg, give me one thing. We always get the question, especially on this series, how can I break into supply chain, or how can I move up that career ladder? Mike, what's one way that you would encourage folks to answer that question these days?
So when I think about how we go through the analyst hiring process, one of the things, and even as I think about we're coming into our end of year kind of appraisal review season, one of the words or kind of collection of words we talk about a lot is behaviors, and what behaviors have people demonstrated. My advice to people that are early in the market or looking to move through the market is put yourself in situations where you can demonstrate behaviors. What's happening is resumes and skills and education is all starting to look very similar.
Mm,
So, if your resume, if you went to Michigan State with a supply chain degree, you're not alone in that, right? And if you're in the top 10% of your class with a Michigan State supply chain degree, guess what? There's 10% of you that have basically a similar resume. What's going to differentiate people is behaviors. Where can you demonstrate to us those leadership behaviors, those ability to collaborate behaviors, those where you've been able to communicate maybe different idea behaviors? That's my biggest piece of advice is differentiate yourself on experiences and behaviors. Don't try to differentiate yourself around what typically in the past may have been important on a resume, kind of those very, this is where I went to school, these are the jobs that I've had. It's about behaviors and experiences. At least that's been my experience.
yep. Well said, Mike. Greg?
Forget terms like work your wage or act your wage and quiet quitting, because you won't have to quit, or you won't be working your wage either, because layoffs are coming, probably even in the supply chain industry, and those will be the people that will go first. I'm not saying to work an 80-hour week either, but don't shortchange yourself by not gaining the experience of hard work in the supply chain and the experience that you get from interacting with other human beings. So, to your point of presence, Scott Luton, be present.
Mm,
I mean, I think I love the flexibility of remote work, but you cannot deny, even people who are huge advocates. I have this debate all the time. Even people who are huge advocates of remote work recognize, acknowledge, and I think relish the opportunity to get in front of people and solve in 2 minutes something you've been working on for 2 weeks, even collaboratively, but
Hmm.
distance like this. So start to think about how you can make your job more satisfying, by being present, being more engaged, and being more active. And it's hard to differentiate yourself other than that, in
yep.
my opinion.
Well, and also remember, it's easy, relatively speaking, to deliver when times are easy. But Mike and Greg are kind of both speaking to differentiations when times get tough, which you
Right.
can really stick out with what you bring to the table. So, Mike and Greg, wonderful conversation. I should just share. T Squared says Honey Nut Cheerios is a banga. Don't slander that one. Now, I'm new to banga. I don't know, Greg.
Banger. That's
What?
what he means. It's a banger.
Oh,
Banger.
gotcha. All right.
I'm
Seems to
with
be.
you, P.
And by the way, Jason joins today. Jason, hope that your newest addition to the family, which is probably a couple months old now, is doing well. Okay. So, Mike, before you leave us, and hopefully you give us just an extra second or two on the exit button, Mike, talk to us. What's the latest going on with Gartner? What should folks be on the lookout for, and how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, so the usual connections, LinkedIn, Gartner.com. We are heads down now planning for our two supply chain symposium, early May in Orlando, first week in June in London, and I think I teed there, sorry, Barcelona. And I think I teed
Cool.
up last time. I also want people to start thinking about October and November. We're going to do two planning summits. So smaller events geared specifically for people that do planning.
Mm,
We did one in 2019. Pre-COVID was incredibly successful in Denver, and we had plans to roll them out, but then COVID got in the way. So right now, really focused on what do we want to deliver for our events.
Love that. And how can folks connect with you? I know you're getting better and better incrementally at LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Incrementally is the key word, Scott. Yes, LinkedIn, and then really email mike.griswold@gartner.com. I have turned off the fax machine, so please don't fax me. But email email is probably the best. Incrementally better at LinkedIn.
And if you put something golf related in the subject line, you probably have a
Oh,
slightly better
Or
percentage.
hoops. Yes.
Or
or
hoops.
basketball. Yes.
Yeah.
All
Yes.
right. Always a pleasure to spend time with one of the smartest guys that we know here, Mike Griswold with Gartner. Mike, always a pleasure. If we don't talk with you, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and we'll have you back in December. Looking forward to that already. Thank you, Mike.
Sounds good. Me too. Thanks, everyone.
Right there. See you,
Alrighty.
Mike.
Man, we covered around the world and then some in 50 minutes, just about after our opening about
Yeah.
a variety of things. So, Greg, other than Honey Nut Cheerios, Mike dropped a ton of a truckload, as always, of great insights and expertise and things to consider, folks out there. What was one of your favorite things he shared here today?
Well, I think his insights around getting into supply chain are particularly valuable. Who could know better than he does, right? I mean, he talks to virtually all of the major employers in supply chain, whether they're practitioners or service providers or technology providers. He knows what it takes to, to make your way in supply chain. It's not his job to know that, but he just talks to these companies about things like retention and hiring and what they're looking for in people to make their organization more successful. That's got to be my favorite. Also, sorry, you said pick one, but I'm going to pick two. I love it when we get to hear him talk about something he really, really knows intimately, like Albertsons. I mean, he worked there. Just fantastic that that he's got the opportunity to do that. And I think a lot of people might have been a homer in that, and Albertsons should have been the surviving entity. But the way that he breaks down why it makes sense that Kroger is the, whatever you want to say, surviving guiding entity in that, it makes perfect sense. So, and it's, it's an incredibly mature position to take. So, which is nothing less than we would expect from Mike.
Good stuff. The whole conversation was a neat one. I was excited as we were putting the kind of the framework of the show together earlier. A lot of good stuff. I enjoyed your perspective as always, Greg. You and Mike are quite the 1-2 punch. Always enjoy these monthly. And folks, in case you don't know, and again, I think this is our third year, but it's the first Wednesday of each month, right? 12 noon Eastern time. Now I say that because next month we're going to a little exception, and there's plenty of exceptions in supply chain. Next is the first Thursday of December is going to be Mike Griswold's appearance here at Supply Chain Now. So y'all check that out. Tune in, bring your questions, bring your observations, and be prepared for a great conversation.
But also come on Wednesday because we'll have something pretty special that day as well.
That is right. And it'll be a whole lot better than canned cranberry sauce on your turkey sandwiches, which is no good. All right. So enough about that. Thanks, everybody. Reggie, T-Squared, Jason, Natalie, PB, who dropped in earlier, Scott Boudreau, great to have you here. Of course, Catherine, Amanda, all the folks we didn't hit. Y'all get ready. Be back with us. Monday is our next live show, Monday for the Supply Chain Buzz, 12 noon Eastern time, where we also walk through the latest and greatest, some of the best, most important news headlines of the day. Greg, always a pleasure to knock these shows out with you.
Yep, likewise. Appreciate it. You are the master of not just ceremonies, but any discussion that occurs in supply chain.
You're too kind. But folks, whatever you do, hey, act on some of what you heard here today. It's all about deeds, not words, right? Differentiate yourself. Find a way. There's plenty of ways to find that. But most importantly, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And with that said, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.